Schmuckler. Uh, I'm continually hungry for good understanding of whatever it is that's going on. It's just sort of like my passion. And I'm very grateful to people who are perceptive and lay things out that I didn't already know and show things to be true that I hadn't figured out for myself, or say things in a way that helps me to hold on to some insight or other. So I spend some hours every day reading the best commentaries on our times that I can find, and watching on TV too. Um, there are both of those are perfectly good media. Newspaper op-eds in New York Times, Washington Post, um, and appearing as a guest on some of these discussions on TV. And I'm an MSNBC fan. I'm not going to get into that Ronna McDaniel stuff, but I appreciate the conversations that I usually hear on that channel. I would say they're at a level of excellence and intelligence that would not be the least bit amiss in a graduate seminar or a faculty a discussion of professors in the field, because that's a lot of time what they are. Let me express my appreciation toward three particular people. I think I'll start with Andrew Weissmann. I was going to start with Paul Krugman, but I'll start with Andrew Weissmann because he's a narrower. So I'm going to go progressively bigger picture. Andrew Weissmann appears on him. Do I need to say who he is? Anyway, he's now at NYU as a professor, et cetera, but he used to be probably the most powerful person below Robert Mueller in those investigations, and he's held a lot of other positions that are really very high up in the American system of justice and law enforcement. He's been around the block, and I think he's late 60s. I think he's like 68. So you can imagine how many games he's seen played. But in addition to that, he's very clear. He doesn't lack for the knowledge. He sees how the game is going and how the moving pieces are operating. And I just find him very educational. I mean, I feel like I learn a lot from listening to him all the time. He has often an instinct for some piece of the picture that does prove to be important that other commentators didn't necessarily pick up. He's not the only really good person. Neil Katyal, Joyce Vance, Lisa Rubin, Dahlia Lithwick. I mean, there are a lot of very perceptive, very capable people. And I don't get the impression that any of them are talking down to the audience in any way. I think they're having the best discussion they're capable of having, and they're very good in their fields. It's been very exciting to get some kind of a legal education of, who can appeal what and all this stuff. Andrew Weissmann points out that, well, she meaning the crappy judge down in Georgia or Florida, didn't decide the issue. So she might be playing this such that the issue doesn't get resolved until a jury's been impaneled. And then it's too late to do anything about her wrecking the trial because that would represent double jeopardy. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. I know about double jeopardy, but the idea that it could be brought up again and would have that impact, anyway, he's really good. The one thing I would fault of him, and he's been moving steadily over the last. I think once the Supreme Court made those completely indefensible decisions, siding with the criminal against the rule of law. That's what it amounts to. They gave him as much delay as they could. It seems. It obviously disturbed him, but meaning Weissmann. But he was slow to talk about what does this show, and he still isn't as far in that direction as I might like. What the Supreme Court did, it is like a blaring neon flashing sign that says there's something serious wrong about who controls the Supreme Court and for what purpose. But one of the things that I've observed about some of these legal guys is that they're so committed to staying within certain boundaries that you don't say what I have been saying since that decision, which is the Supreme Court is now manifestly occupied territory by the force of fascism. That's simply the only reasonable conclusion to reach. And I think that Andrew Weissmann kind of knows that, but I don't think it's entirely broken through even to his understanding, and even more so to what he's willing to say. Nonetheless, there are so many processes that are involved with following the way the question is being answered. Will Donald Trump be held accountable to the rule of law? Or is it no longer the case that no one is above the law in the United States? That's the question. And it's being fought out in a number of legal battlefields. And I am very grateful to Andrew Weissmann to explain the game. It's like watching a football game, and some of the people who played the thing at the pro level, not just the high school level like me, they understand that what the defense is doing, or what the offensive coordinator is put into as a strategy for the game. They see what's going on and they understand things and can point them out in the replay. And that's what I get from Andrew Weissmann and from a lot of the other people, but he'd be my first draft choice. So that's one of the three great interpreters. Another one is Paul Krugman, who has does he write 2 columns a week at the New York Times? I think he does. He is a busy fellow. And I've been following him with a great deal of respect and appreciation since about the year 2000. No, 2000 and a couple. I've just been, he understood way better than just about anybody else that the W presidency was showing some very troubling and problematic qualities that we weren't used to seeing in American politics. I was trying to raise the alarm about the same thing around the same time, and I also really appreciate that he's a master at the craft of writing a persuasive op-ed. He really knows how to build an argument. I mean, I got brought up in that craft. I hope that I'm good. When he has an argument to make, you can see that he makes lots and lots of right-on decisions about what order to tell you things in and what points to stress. Really good. So I've been reading him for more than 20 years. And he's brilliant, and he's smart in a way that my dad was. And I'd like to say my dad was as smart as Krugman, but I think my dad would say that Krugman was smarter, but my dad was very smart. He died young, right after his major work came out. My son was told by a professor of economics when he was in college that my father might have won the Nobel Prize in economics if he hadn't died before anybody could notice his achievement. I don't know if he was that good or not, but he definitely, growing up as his son, you learn to appreciate the discipline of laying out an argument. And Paul Krugman has been doing it twice a week for years and years, and they're all worth reading. Only a few of them I think, well, I kind of knew that. Usually I learn something from him, and I'm very, very grateful for how he does that. And of course, his Nobel Prize was in economics, and he's got a particular eye open for what's going on with the economic situation. Like he talks these days about is inflation coming down? Is there a danger of inflation taking off, or is the greater danger that the Fed will keep it too tight? These are questions that, as an economist, he's particularly strong about. It was through all that he discovered certain things about what was happening on the right. He started noticing that the right has got these zombie ideas, he called them, things that are obviously been killed again and again and again because they don't hold water, like supply side economics. Failed under Reagan, it failed under the first Bush, it failed to deliver what it was supposed to deliver when Trump gave $2 trillion, trickle up. He talked about that. And he talked also about how some kind of lack of integrity was appearing in the economics part of the force that was rising on the right, that no matter how many times they've been proven wrong, somehow they never change their views. And that was sort of a key, I think, that led him into understanding the war on truth altogether, that the force that was taking over the right was waging about Trump's indictments right now, but also about climate change and about whether there's a systemic racism problem in America. And every place you look, there's a war on the truth. When I ran for Congress out here, because I was frustrated that the Democrats weren't saying what I thought needed to be said about what was taking over the right, I ran on the slogan, "Truth for a Change." Paul Krugman has noticed that and called attention for years and years about the lack of integrity with respect to the truth that's taken over the right. Not just the economics. I mean, he branched out. He grew out of being just an economist into a guy that has a lot of insight into certain dimensions, at least, of the crisis as it has arisen in America. So that now that we've reached this point where a force of fascism threatens the survival of American democracy, Krugman noticed it happening. The third, he has a wider lens than Weissmann, who's about the legal process. But wider still, at least from my point of view, I'm by trade, I guess you might say, a social theorist, if you want, a theory of history, big picture forces at work, et cetera, et cetera. I regard the overall context as being about certain kinds of forces that we need to understand. And Timothy Snyder is a real champion of that level of insight into our present situation. He's made a life's work out of studying. Actually, I'm not sure. I've never said this. I've never read it. So maybe this is not quite on target, but might be. The ways in which fascistic forces operate destructively in the human world. And I think that that is clearly one of the major, maybe the major issue in our particular times. So Timothy Snyder wrote this book titled Bloodlands. And it was about what happened during a certain span of time from the late 1920s to the end of World War II, I think, about what happened to the populations of certain countries like Ukraine that were sort of between Stalinist Russia, the Soviet Union, and then the rise of the Nazi regime in Germany, that between the two of them, the bloodlands were a scene of a huge historical nightmare. And Stalin and Hitler were, in a sense, you could say, well, one's on the right and one's on the left. I don't think that captures what's really important about. Well, at what the level that's really important, I haven't read Bloodlands. I've read a little bit of it. I don't know how Snyder talked about it. This was some years back. But I would say that Stalin and Hitler are two different versions of the same thing. And we can call it fascism, or come up with some other name that allows it to be with a communistic regime. But essentially, I think that they were the same thing. And now Timothy Snyder he's written books on tyranny and on the battle in America and Europe against fascism as a rising force. And I get an email from him, I'm not sure how often, once a week, twice a week, where he talks about he has real insight into the Putin regime, and he keeps pointing out the dynamics of it as an example of the fascistic spirit that he represents, and then you can make connections with other fascistic spirits, like the ones that are blocking aid to Ukraine because they're controlling the fascistic Republican force. That the pro-Putin wing of the Republican Party is controlling the House of Representatives. He understands those kinds of things, and he talks about them meaningfully, and I'm always happy to read his emails. He understands that we're dealing here with larger forces at work in the human world. My Better Human Story takes it a couple layers down below that to look at what is the origin of that fascistic force and the force of brokenness generally in the human world. But that's my bailiwick, is what's happened to our species and how these battles that we're fighting now can be best understood as the consequence of certain really big picture things about the dynamics of being a civilization creating species. So I go from democracy versus fascism down a layer, from Trump versus Biden or Biden versus Trump to democracy versus fascism to the human thriving versus human degrading to the human good versus evil, life versus death. All these things track and can be seen in a much larger framework. But I'm really working hard to understand all the layers above it, all the way down to the layer that where what the filing by Jack Smith to get the Supreme Court to hurry up and get this trial on the road. It just makes me furious and disgusted. I'd like to ask Weissmann some questions about this filing. I mean, what are the chances of any success? If the Supreme Court hadn't wanted to delay the whole thing so it couldn't take place before the election, why would they have behaved like this? Is there some way that Jack Smith is able to push them into doing something they decided to do just the opposite, to help Trump avoid being held accountable? Anyway, I don't understand the gamut, but I'm for succeeding. And I'd like to ask some questions about it. So these are three commentators that I feel very grateful to and recommend to everybody that if you're not following what these guys say, they're good teachers. Every one of those three are really excellent teachers. And they understand a lot about the state of various kinds of levels of the battle, from democracy versus fascism up to Trump versus the rule of law. I recommend them if those things interest you. Well, I'm not sure if I should actually say this. I have aspirations to be an interpreter of our times, and I utilize my weekly platform of newspapers in the district where I ran for Congress as a place to put out messages that I hope will help more people see more of what's going on in America and what's going on globally and what's going on in the story of the human species. Presenting a lot of different slices of all that show how there's a big picture to be had. And the part I'm not sure whether I should say or not is that I've been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize for 2023 in commentary. Not to make too big a deal about the nomination. It's not the same as winning the prize, but the newspapers were willing to nominate me and to do that work and to put up some money. So there was a certain amount of honor in it, but the real honor, I'm holding on to, a little bit of hope, but it's very improbable that they will hit upon me. There will be, in May, announced somebody will win the Pulitzer Prize for commentary. And two people will be designated finalists for the prize without winning. And I feel like the chances of my getting, they're from past years, I think we can assume that maybe just a bit under 100 people will be competing there for that. And so the numbers by themselves indicate how unlikely it is. I bring it up, well, partly because it's kind of fun to think about the possibility. But I have reasons for thinking that when they look at what I've produced, maybe they'll think highly of it enough, but they'll think, well, this isn't what we usually think of as op-ed commentary. Because I'm basically a big picture social theorist guy who's continually been trying to understand what the hell's going on here in this situation. And I put messages out that are crafted in a way that sort of integrate a variety of levels and in a way that isn't what you usually find on the op-ed pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post. So I'm thinking that they'll say, well, this is a little bit unusual. So whatever the quality, we need to give the prize to somebody who's doing more like what we think of as, newspaper commentary. Not that mine, don't qualify, but you put them all together. I nominated 7 pieces from 2023. And if you want to see what basically what the nature of the kind of thing that I've had to offer. And not the Pulitzer Prize people will be looking at stuff that's like what you'll find on my website. The website itself is abetterhumanstory.org. And what I've got there is a selection of op-ed pieces under a portal you can go into, which is called Messages to the Conservatives, which is the op-eds that I send out here in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, where it's 2-to-1 people who would vote for Trump. So I've been making my effort to communicate. Sometimes I skip over that red section and talk to the other people, but most of the time I'm trying to show something about what's true in our world, and to show it in a way that will move people on my side of the divide to see the nature of the battle more clearly, and on the other side of the divide to see that what they're supporting is contrary to the values that they used to say that they had. I mean, that's how one way of separating. So if you want to go there to that portal, Messages to the Conservatives, at my website, abetterhumanstory.org, you can see what the kind of thing that the Pulitzer Prize Committee is going to look at. I actually, if they said that they were going to have 6 finalists, I might venture into being a little bit optimistic. Because I believe in what I've done, and even if I'm not the right breed, sometimes in my life I've gotten best of breed things where I get rejected. So I kind of think that I might have had a chance to make the sexy 6. I mean, here it is, March Madness, the Elite 8 is coming up, but maybe 6, but to have 2. I don't know. Is that realistic that people will look at that stuff and think this has got to be acknowledged in some way? I don't know. But I try to be a meaningful interpreter of our times. It is part of the mission that I've taken on and that I'm pursuing with everything that I can bring to it, including being here talking on these videos, which are my most recent attempt to interpret our times so that we can see the nature of the battle we're engaged in as Americans and as human beings on this planet, with so much that's sacred at stake. Thank you for listening.